Okay, ready to get started?
Mhm.
Okay, well, hello everybody. Welcome to one of our amazing Fresh Starts free webinars. Lorraine Connell is one of our amazing experts, and she is a teen leadership coach, which is so cool. And she is so passionate about supporting teens to I don't know, do everything, activate in their community and work on their college resumes and really get confident, right? Really, that's everything that you do. So she is going to be talking to us today about how we, as the grown-ups in the lives of teens, can support the teens that we love in helping them with their leadership. And I have a sneaking suspicion it will help us too. So I'm going to let Lorraine take over from here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Olivia. And thank you to Fresh Starts for giving me this opportunity to share this incredible information with all of you so that you are empowered to empower the kids in your life. And my ultimate goal is that the work that I do here has an impact on somebody else, and that impact has an impact on somebody else. So it's a ripple effect. So whatever you take away from today, my hope is that you share it with somebody in your life and then they see something different in their life, which then empowers them to do more. All right. So I want to share a little bit about who I am and how I got to want to do this work. Before I started the company Peers Not Fears, I was a teacher, I was a parent, I was a coach, I was an advisor, but I wasn't a leader. I wasn't. I had attempted to take a couple of steps into leadership positions as a teacher, and I didn't get those positions. And so it reaffirmed to me that I wasn't a leader. And that is honestly the reason why I started this company. But to get to that reason, I had a couple of experiences. When I was a teacher, I taught chemistry and chemistry, student leadership, how do you get there? It's all about being able to have other people know that they can do hard things. And chemistry, if anybody remembers, is a hard class. And none of my students, unless they totally gave up, failed my class because I helped them see that you need resources, you need supports. And so it naturally made sense to me to step into a teacher role where I was guiding student leaders. And the school that I worked at, we had 2-year courses. So a kid could take it for 2 years, it could take it for 1 year, but they were able to get elective high school credits in leadership. It was incredible. It was amazing. I was really, really proud to be part of a school that did that. And I finally was given the opportunity to run that program. Through that program, I encountered some challenges. Number one, we gave kids these titles. You are a peer leader. We are so proud of you. We're going to give you this title. We're going to put you on this pedestal. And now you are a role model. Wow, that feels really, really good. Oh, except if you make a mistake. And I had a student who during my tenure made a mistake. One of the bigger mistakes, right? It was it was just when vaping started coming out, and this student was caught in the area on school properties, and the people around them had vapes. And this student came to me and said, Miss Connell, I know that I made a mistake. Is there something else I can do? Because at the time we were like, you have made a mistake. We want to make a role model out of you. And we want to make sure that you are now not a peer leader. You're not in NHS. You're not part of drama. You're not in your sports anymore. You have to suffer these consequences. And this student came to me and said, but can I do something else? Like, I see this opportunity where I can go talk to the freshmen that I'm in charge of and I can tell them my story. And I said, no, I'm so sorry. You made this choice. You don't get to choose the consequence. And I remember the reaction of that student saying to me, I feel like I'm in this hole and somebody else is digging me deeper and deeper. And at the time, I was like, wow, that's like, you're not taking any ownership over this. And I remember feeling so like, nope, you made this choice. We have to make a role model out of you. I did speak to this student a couple years ago, about a year ago, and I asked them, what did you learn in that experience? I learned that I was a failure. I learned that I can't make mistakes. And I learned if I do make mistakes, I have to figure out a way to hide them. Yeah, that's exactly what I taught this student. And that is not what we should be teaching our future leaders. And so that experience, coupled with me seeing these students, these overlooked students, and saying to them, hey, I see you as a leader. You should sign up to be part of peer leadership program. And they looked at me like I had three eyes. And I said, well, why not? And they said, I'm not a leader because I make mistakes. So they saw this perfectly good student making a mistake, and it translated to them that if you make any mistake, you can't be a leader. And so those two experiences made me realize that we weren't doing leadership the right way. Because if we're only giving a small number of students these opportunities, and if they make a mistake, we're taking those opportunities away, that then we can't be developing leadership for all students. And I tell you the story about the student that I had that experience with to tell you that I thought I was doing a great job. And I really thought I was empowering these kids to take on ownership and do good things. But I had a real negative impact on one or two kids, and I didn't even know. I mean, this one I definitely knew, but there were other kids that this happened to, and I knew that I had a role in that. And when I tried to push back and I tried to create the leadership program for these students who made mistakes, it wasn't okay with our administration because these are our role models. They have to be perfect. And I was like, but I'm not perfect. I mean, I try really hard to be perfect, but I'm not perfect. How can I expect these kids to be perfect? And so I left teaching in 22, June of 22, and I started Peers Not Fears. I had started it before then, but what I created Peers Not Fears for was to develop leadership skills for the kids that are overlooked, the kids that are shy, introverted, the neurodiverse student, and even the challenging kids, the bad kids. I created a program that would meet every kid where they are and let them know that they could do hard things and that they could be leaders. And so I always do this fun activity, and maybe you don't think it's fun, but I love it because I get new and creative ideas from people. But I ask this question, and I'd love for you to put it in the chat, or come off mute if you're willing to share, and tell me what you believe to be the definition of leadership. And in all of my work, there are no right or wrong answers. So you can add it to the chat if you would like to add it into the chat. I do that with my teens because they're not usually ready to come off mute just yet. But if you are willing to come off mute and share what your definition of a leader is, I would love you to start there. Yeah, go for it.
Um, for me, leadership has been defined by vulnerability and how often being in a leader position, you're able to admit being wrong. Um, in my experience of leadership, I thought leadership was I'm kind of like Godzilla towering over people and throwing buildings aside, and people just being expected to listen to what I had to say because I have the leader title. But I recognized once I was able to say, hey, you know what? Here's where I messed up. My bad. People were able to connect with me on a deeper level and want to listen to what I have to say more.
That's so awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
I'll go. Oh, Claire, you go.
Okay. Well, I was thinking more of leadership as, like Shantae said, not like just because I have the title, you're going to listen to what I say, but kind of like organize. Like if you're a teenager and you're working on a group project, like
Yeah.
you're not just going to give out a list of tasks that everyone has to do. You're going to organize, everyone's thoughts and kind of work together to make sure that everyone like has their opinion heard, but keeping everyone on task as kind of, if you're a leader in the group, you're making sure that everyone is like keeping up with the work that they're supposed to be doing. So it's like, it's almost like the true leaders don't have the title. It's just like how they act with their peers, making sure that like everyone stays on task and, not goofing off or whatever that is.
Yeah, that's so good too.
I love both of these answers. I was gonna say what came to mind was listening is leadership, right? So listening to what everybody has to say and what everybody thinks, and kind of like integrating that with the plan ahead, is because your ego is not in it then,
Mm.
right? And so like that to me, like listening and leadership are hand in hand.
That's awesome. You think if we had 4 or 5 more people that they would have like the same ideas, or do you think they might have slightly different ideas? Similar but different? Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I don't know. I think similar but different. And I think so much of our view of leadership comes from what we've seen, right? Especially in our teen level. And I think what you said before too, Lorraine, like we give these names to the kids. Like at my high school, it was like you're a natural born helper. That was like this. You wanted to be what does that mean to be a natural born helper, right? Like okay,
So
right? So
terrible.
right, like what is that? What are these names? What's behind these names, right? That we're putting on these college resumes.
Yeah. And I do this activity and I ask the next question as well, for similar reasons. So if there were 30 people or 100 people or 1,000 people, we would all maybe be similar, but we'd all be different. So when I tell you to be a leader, you have a definition of what leadership means to you, but it might be different than what it means to me. And so it makes it really hard for anybody, but especially our teens, to know what it means to be a leader, because your definition, while similar, is different. And so I, as a mom, expect certain things of my kids, and then they don't do them because they didn't know that was my expectation, right? That's where we always kind of come into conflict with our kids. But the same thing is true for leadership. The definition of leadership is ambiguous enough and not clear enough to anyone that it makes it really hard for our teens to step into leadership. And when you say step into leadership to a teen, it feels gigantic. And that's what I try and dispel with my teens. So now my next question is, what do you think the requirement to being a leader is? Yeah, I know. You're like, well, I thought I had an answer, but now after you just said that, maybe I don't. And the same thing is true. We all have, and they're all wonderful things that we say this is the requirement. But if we stop and realize that they're not requirements, but yet qualities, then we understand again that leadership is such an enigma, and what the requirements are so vague that again, it makes it really, really scary and really, really hard for our teens to feel comfortable saying, I'm a leader. And so I have broken it down. There is one requirement. The one single requirement to being a leader is that you make a decision. And I love to tell the teens, whether you got up this morning or you did not, and you snoozed your alarm, you made a decision. And now, if you snoozed and missed school, some might say that was a bad decision, right? But you, as the teen, are the only one that can really define whether that was a good or a bad decision. Because I'm going to tell you, as your mother, that that was a bad decision because it made me late for work. So that was a bad decision for me that you did that. But if I'm the teen and I stayed up really late studying and I didn't know what the impacts of staying up late was going to feel like, maybe sleeping in wasn't such a bad thing, because if I had gotten up and gone to school, I probably would have gotten in an argument with my mom. I probably would have snapped at my friends. I probably would have done really terribly on that test. And so we take these qualifiers and we decide whether they're good or bad for other people. And so I like to tell the teens that, well, number one, you're making 30,000 decisions on the daily. So you're already a leader. Leadership, and this is one of the myths, but leadership, like basketball, is something that you can get better at, right? So if I'm like really bad at basketball, I really am, what am I going to do to get better? I'm going to hire a coach. I'm going to join a team. I'm going to practice. I'm going to try that skill out. I'm going to get feedback. The same thing is true with leadership, but we put people in the positions of leadership without that. I think of that young teen that I had that conversation with. They had had no training. They were naturally a good leader. They had some of those skills, but they didn't have the idea of what to do. Actually, I would say they did know what to do when they made a mistake. I didn't know what to do when that leader made a mistake. And so I had to learn from that experience. And so if we now know the only requirement is making a decision, then everything else that we list under what makes a good leader is something that we can get better at, right? So public speaking or leading a group is often what people say makes a good leader. Well, that's not something you're either good or bad at. It's something you build your skills at. And so that's my favorite part of this webinar, is that when you walk away, you now know that every single person is a leader, because every single person is making decisions. How they deal with those decisions, whether they set goals and they know if that decision is taking them towards their goal or not towards their goal, that's where we decide and we develop those skills. So now I want to do an activity where I am going to, 1 second, going to share my screen, and you should see a 3 concentric circles, a yellow circle, a green circle, and a blue circle. Okay, I use this visual to represent the common phrase that we often will see and hear in our friend groups, in our workplaces, on social media, about the term about comfort zones, right? We have all been given the guidance that we need to step outside our comfort zone. And we know that it's a really good thing for us. And our teens have also heard about stepping outside their comfort zone. But what we don't share is that if this is my comfort zone, this yellow zone in the middle, and this is me stepping outside my comfort zone, what's this blue zone? Because that blue zone is pretty far away from my comfort zone. What is that? Well, that's the panic zone. So you can step outside of your comfort zone and shoot yourself into your panic zone. We don't talk about that. We just say step outside, and we assume you understand that you're not going to step too far out. But we don't know that. We don't know that. It's in between your comfort zone and your panic zone. That's where the growth happens. That's where we're challenging ourselves. And so that's why we call that green zone in the middle the challenge zone. aptly termed, because that's where we're challenging ourselves. Now, if I am currently in my comfort zone and I step outside my comfort zone, I could literally be putting one foot in my challenge zone while keeping my other foot in my comfort zone, and I'm still learning. I could also have one foot in my panic zone and one foot in my challenge zone, and I'm still learning. You can see how in both of those situations, the learning is going to feel a lot different. So I like to ask a couple of questions, and this is where the annotation piece comes in, is I want you to find the option to annotate, and I'm going to ask you a question about something. Let's see. So I clicked on my annotate button, and I'm going to go to where the check mark is, and the check mark is a stamp, and I can choose a check mark, an arrow, an X, a heart, a star, question mark. So pick something, and I think you can also change the color if you want to change the color. But if you were to assess whether you are in your comfort zone, your challenge zone, or your panic zone when it comes to spiders, please mark on this screen where you fall when it comes to interacting and seeing spiders. Okay, so got Olivia. I got Shayna. Claire, were you able to get and see how to do it?
I don't think I can figure out how to do it.
Well, where would you put yourself?
The challenge zone, probably.
Okay, kind of like where Olivia is, or closer
Yeah.
to the blue. Okay. Okay. So if we are visually looking at this, you can see that some of us not so fearful of spiders. Some of us, no thank you. Don't let that spider near me. And others are like, oh, if I see one, I guess I'll figure it out. Okay, so I'm gonna use Shayna and me in this example. So we're at home, a spider is around. My guess is Shayna's gonna flip her lid. Maybe she's not gonna freak out really loud, but she is going to express her discomfort and her unknown what to do. And I'm sitting next to her and I'm like, oh, I'll take care of it. Right? So I now have taken care of the panic that Shayna's feeling, and she might move herself a little bit closer. She's not panicking, but she's not in love with what's happening. And I have this moment of like, okay, if I leave the room to go get a tissue to get this spider, what's going to happen when I leave the room? Is she going to freak out? Is she going to cause chaos with somebody else in the house? Right. So now it's not so simple for me. It's become a little more challenging for me. Same thing is true in any situation. Math, for example. Give me a second. I'm going to clear our drawings. Put yourself on the screen for where you are for math. Okay, and how about you, Claire? Where would you put yourself?
In the comfort zone.
Okay, good. All right, so now you see that almost everybody's kind of flipped where they were. The situation changed, the environment changed, the content has changed, and so have we. So now, in this case, maybe Claire reaches out to Olivia and says, hey, what are you working on? Do you need some help? Or maybe a teacher has told Claire to say, hey, reach out to Olivia, right? What's the benefit for Claire in that, right? She's already figured it out. She doesn't really need to. Is she just helping Olivia? Well, the answer is no. Just like with the spider, she is pulling herself out of her comfort zone. When I was a teacher, I very rarely told the person in Olivia's position that she was helping the person in their comfort zone, because it never occurred to me that there was other help being had besides the content. But in reality, when Olivia is struggling, Claire has to figure out a way to combat her panic, figure out how to support her in a way that is helpful so that Olivia is coming out of that blue panic zone and is coming closer to her green zone. And so what I love to tell teens is that if you're in your yellow zone and you're in math class, look around. You know the face of that person who is in their panic zone. You know that they're like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. And put a hand out and give them some support, because if you're in your yellow zone, you're not learning either, because it's so easy for you that you're not being challenged. And so we can go through all sorts of things. I could ask you about singing in the shower, singing a solo, right? And all of those things are going to shift you in different places, as well as different people are going to be in different places too. So when we instruct other people to step outside their comfort zone, we first have to know, how far are we going outside of our comfort zone? Because if we go too far out, it's no benefit to us. And if we are in our comfort zone, there are very different ways in which we can be outside of our comfort zone. So I love to encourage you, if you do have teens in your life, to have this conversation with them and to ask them, say, what about dogs? Where are you for dogs? Right? I've been in my comfort zone this whole time in both of those examples. I'm way out here for dogs. I don't love them. I do love a dog that I know, but if I don't know that dog, I'm freaking out. My body goes right into freeze mode, shutting down. And so my husband, who's in his comfort zone when it comes to dogs, has to share with me, hey, do you see his tail? Do you see those flags along the pathway? You're going to be okay. And he knows that if he talks me down, he's pulling me into that green zone. And he has to figure out, what is it going to be that's going to help me? So he can't just walk by that dog like there's no big deal. He's got to figure out a way to get me to come down. So that's pushing him outside of his comfort zone. And you might learn some really cool things. And your teen is also going to learn some really cool things. And now both you and your teen can see where there is opportunity for you to help each other, and understand that by helping each other, you're both growing and developing as leaders. All right. What do you think? Something you didn't know before? Okay. So I mentioned the myth that leadership is something you're born with. And the actual term that Olivia's school used, natural born helper, really reinforces that belief that it is a skill that you are either born with or not. And that is what keeps us feeling like we can't grow in leadership. Well, they didn't give me that science department chair position. I guess I'm not a leader. That's the other thing, is if I don't have a title, I guess I'm not a leader, right? But my titles were different. They were parent, they were teacher, they were coach, advisor. How in the world was I not a leader? In all four of those examples alone, I was leading groups of people in a direction. Not to mention that every decision I made was leading me in a direction. And not everybody is ready to lead others, but we do have to recognize that our decisions lead us. And when we know that our decisions are leading us, then we're able to understand how leadership is important to each and every one of us. Okay, so leadership has a title. That's one myth. You are born either a leader or not. And the third one is perfection. Leaders don't make mistakes. And so if you just think about some of the most prominent leaders right now, are they willing to accept that they make mistakes? Are they willing to hold themselves accountable? And I find that there's an awful lot of leaders right now, really high up, really average leaders, who are not willing to hold themselves accountable, who are not willing to let themselves make mistakes. And when we have that belief, it prevents us from showing others. So as a parent, we want to be superheroes. We want our kids to see us as the most amazing thing. And so if I make a mistake, can I still be a superhero? And that's a question that you have to ask yourself, because if the answer is no, then your kid's always going to have you on that pedestal, and they're not going to be able to reach you. And if you don't believe that you're a leader, then your kids aren't also going to think that they can be leaders. And so the first thing that you have to do is accept that being a parent is the most important leader that your kid will ever have. The decisions we make, the mistakes that we make, the titles that we have or don't have and hold ourselves to are sending the message about those myths to our kids. And so, all of that being said, I have a leadership program for teens to help them demystify those beliefs. I bring them into a Zoom like this and I give them challenges. And I also tell them that they can't fail. You can't fail this program, because no matter what you choose to do, you're getting better. Even if you literally do nothing, you're still doing something because you're thinking about the activity that I've sent you to do. If you don't do it, it's okay. You just didn't go as far as somebody else. But we're all coming into this in our challenge, comfort, and panic zones from different experiences. So you may not be ready to do the challenge the way I put it out there for you. For example, one of the activities I ask the kids to do is to observe how they interact with the people that they greet every day. How are you greeting the people that you see? Are you doing the same thing over and over again? And what do you respond with when somebody greets you? Are you responding the same way over and over again? So that's part one. Part two is try and change it. And then reflect. Could you do it? Why not? Why was it easy? And then we come back and we share and we talk about, well, I tried. I did some observations. I learned I say the same thing, but every time I tried to say something different, I went right back to saying the same thing. Okay, cool. That's great. Or, yeah, I didn't have time to do it. I'm like, well, did you observe? Did you notice? And yeah, actually I did. So there's like, for me, there's no failure because we're all learning. And the stigma about failure is that it's bad. And for me, it's not. It's incredible. So I'd love to stop there because I've done a lot of talking and open it up for questions. What kind of questions do you guys have for me?
Yeah, you know what I'm gonna do, Lorraine, is I'm gonna stop recording so people
Okay.
they can ask questions. So before we stop the recording, all of this info will also be in the show notes for this, so anybody can get in touch with Lorraine. And I'm gonna hit stop and then people can ask questions.